Welcome in to Red River North on Ghost SEC channel. Randy Heights, Dave Meyer, 107.7 The Franchise. Well, we made it, boys and girls. Regional time, NCAA tournament, what it's all about. We were just talking about the gauntlet that Texas got at home in their regional with the mighty UTSA Roadrunners. But Randy, you and I have been discussing this all week. News broke today which way Oklahoma was going to go. It will indeed be Malachi Witherspoon that gets a start against Nebraska. A lot of thought, maybe pushing Kyson back. You and I talked about that. We saw why you would. We kind of talked about why you wouldn't. It's a risk, but I like the fact that they got that much faith in Malachi to give the kid the baseball in this spot.
No doubt. And my debate with you guys online when I was, Regal Beagle that was asking that question, when I was so adamant about Kyson. And I started thinking about it before this came out, and I even said it on the franchise today. It's like, it's a different world now with the single elimination tournaments. Normally with double elimination tournaments, unless you went 2 and Q, your 3 weekend starters are thrown the week before. Right. So it's a no-brainer in the 2-3 matchup that you go with your number one guy, And so I do think it is a spot now that I'm ready to see what happens around the country. Like you mentioned, it came out that Malachi is starting today, the number 2-3 guy for the University of Oklahoma. He's going to start against Nebraska. And in some ways it makes sense when you realize, hey, because of the single elimination tournament, Malachi hasn't pitched since they faced Texas. And that was, in my opinion, without a doubt, maybe his best start of his career at Oklahoma. And he's had 2 pretty good starts in a row. So I don't have a big problem with it, but I do think you are playing with fire, Dave. If they were to lose that game and you look over and go, oh, wow, there's a guy that's going to go in the top 10, top 15 picks in the Major League Draft that you saved for a game that's not guaranteed.
Yeah, I mean, dude, it's a risk. We talked about this. It can have the ultimate backfire on Oklahoma. You got to think Nebraska is a little bit pissed off hearing this. In fact, kind of reading their fans' reaction, I think the team's going to have a bit of a chip on their shoulder. They probably would have anyway, but they're not a gimme. They were 15-15 in the Big Ten, just won the Big Ten tournament. They come in winners 6 of the last 7, kind of on a roll. So, you know what? I agree with you. If they go down, it's going to be a very tough look with it going down with Kyson on the bench. But I like the fact they have enough faith in Malachi Witherspoon. And apparently anytime this happens, they have had to go to the kid and said, look, this is what we're thinking. This is what can happen if it backfires, if we happen to lose it and not going to be a good look. He had to have the gumption to say, you know what, give me the baseball. I know what's at stake. I'm good enough. I'm confident enough to go out and get this done. Randy, we talked about the backfire aspect. If it works, though, and they've got Kyson safe for North Carolina, who's going to pound Holy Cross, that's a really good thing. I know Jake Knapp of the Tar Heels is really good. That's going to set Oklahoma up very nicely with Kyson and Cade ready to go.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, that puts a matchup, if Oklahoma wins and North Carolina wins, that puts a matchup against 2 elite pitchers in the country. I mean, Knapp's numbers, to be honest, in some ways are even better than Kyson's in some areas. You look at it and you're going, this kid's a stud. North Carolina is a top 5 national seed, and he's one of the big reasons why, So that would be a hell of a matchup. And I'll just say this. Let's just say worst case scenario for Oklahoma and Nebraska loses. Then I think the coaches are in another quandary because they still want to win the regional, right? But do you really throw Kyson against Holy Cross? And I'm not trying to be mean here.
No,
I don't even know if I throw Cade Crossland at that point in time against Holy Cross.
I might throw Jaden Barfield against Holy Cross, to be honest.
Exactly. And that's kind of where it's like it sets up a dynamic where you can leave with egg on your face totally, potentially. It's just weird. I don't blame it, but I think it's a pretty fun regional. Holy Cross, I mean, I'll say this. I've seen more Patriot League teams than not go in and pull that number 4 seed upset. I don't think they will, But it's so easy for a team like North Carolina as the 1 seed to, instead of throwing any of their 3 weekend starters, throw that midweek guy. And next thing you know, Holy Cross gets 3 or 4 runs early on, and they're digging out of a hole.
Yeah, Georgia Dog, Mr. Ed Hare asking if we're live. Yes, sir, we are. Good to see you in the chat. Randy, it can backfire in Oklahoma, as we just talked about. Malachi has been good, which you just said. I think his last 2 or 3 starts of the season were the guy's best, but it's going to come down to this 1-3 as always. It's going to come down to playing defense without committing errors. That they're 107th in the country in fielding percentage. They had a great week in Hoover up until when they didn't. They turned 5 double plays, including 3 against Kentucky to help win that game, and then a disastrous defensive showing against Vanderbilt, the #1 overall seed. But Randy, going back through this season, dude, Oklahoma beat Vanderbilt in the series in Norman 2 out of 3 games. They beat Ole Miss 2 out of 3 games. 2 national hosts, the #1 overall seed, Vanderbilt Commodores. This team can play with the best in baseball. It's going to be tested this weekend. I think North Carolina is a prohibitive national championship favorite. In fact, I've got them in the national championship game in that bracket.
I think you're right.
Uh-oh. Randy's frozen. He looks good while he's frozen, but he is frozen. And now he's dropped. Well, Dave Myrick with you tonight. Well, Randy gets are you back, Mr. Heights? Well, his face is back. He's not back. Just to kind of recap, talking about Oklahoma, Nebraska. Oklahoma pushes Kyson Witherspoon out of the starting role against the Cornhuskers. They're betting his brother, twin brother Malachi, can get the win. And the logic is they have Kyson Witherspoon, one of the best in baseball, ready to go against North Carolina. The problem is they will have Jake Knapp ready to go, one of the best in all of baseball as well. Randy, you back?
Yeah, I love internet, right?
Yeah, oh, yeah, always.
It's lovely. No, I forget what we were even talking about, but where were we talking about?
That's a great question. Okay, Oklahoma beat Vandy. They beat Ole Miss. They beat the best in baseball. They have a chance to do it when they take the field.
No doubt. And I think off the top of my head, without even thinking, against the national seeds alone, I believe Oklahoma was 7-10. Yeah, not a winning record, but it kind of validates and proves your point. They can go out and win games against anyone, but it goes down to, again, that defense. You talked about it. I will say this. First 2 games, very impressed with the SEC with how they came out and played with an edge on, almost a chip on their shoulder, it felt like, in those first 2 games. The Vanderbilt game rolled around, and I'll be honest, I'm gonna put a little blame on the coaches here. I felt like with some of the lineup changes they did and everything, it reminded me when I saw that lineup, like, hey, they're not giving this game away, but it's like they don't care as much. They're getting some guys some work, And it felt like at that point on, the team played that way from the offensive standpoint, opposite of what they had done in the first 2 games, to even defensively, to your point, how they played in the first 2 games. Just seemed like they were like, okay, we're here to play. And that's not an excuse, but it was really a weird vibe in that game, I thought.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, Dayton Taki that had played, the previous 2 games at first base, I guess gets a night of rest for that hairline fracture that miraculously healed, and Horton takes his spot. Horton had a really tough night at first base, dropped a pop fly that would have been the 3rd out. And, of course, when you do that, the baseball gods, that they always tend to pound you for it. 3 runs come across for Vandy, and that was all she wrote. But I don't know what all Oklahoma had to play for at that point. They had already won 2 games in the SEC tournament, which, talking to people over there, they were the talk of the town for 2 days. I mean, their first ever SEC tournament, they go 2-0. That meant something. They beat the Georgia Bulldogs. Ed's team, a very potent lineup, I think lead the nation in home runs. Unfortunately for Ed, they got to see Kyson Witherspoon up close and personal, and the guy is a damn good pitcher. So jumping back to that regional coming up, in North Carolina, Chapel Hill, I don't like it for Oklahoma, Randy. A couple of reasons. North Carolina has an elite pitching staff, and they're capable of winning games 2-0. I kind of like a matchup when Oklahoma plays somebody like a Georgia that really relies on hitting the baseball, scoring runs, because with OU's pitching, they can control that. A team like North Carolina, that's a tough hill to climb for this 1-9. I'll say this, though. With North Carolina, that's kind of the point where maybe one swing of the bat is enough to dictate what happens in that game, because their offense, they're not juggernauts. I think they're hitting 287 on the year with 73 home
Oklahoma's
runs.
hitting like 274 with 61. So yeah, the
Right.
offenses are very comparable.
Right.
I think you're right, and I think what's going to be interesting this week that we haven't got to see in over a month, Dayton Taki's it looks like going to be able to play the field. Hasn't played since he fractured his ankle. He's going to be at first base according to Skip Johnson. At least he said he's progressing that way. That's what he said Monday at the selection show, and he expects him to see there. And I think in some ways that frees them up to do a little more with this offensive lineup because they've been pigeonholed, whether it was Dayton Taki or in that DH role they're having to use Easton Carmichael or Scott Mudler. Now you get one of your better bats back in the actual lineup, and maybe you can play a little more with that DH role and find that right mix. And so it's going to be interesting to see what they do with that, I think, on Friday as well.
Yeah, also, I'm kind of jumping ahead past Nebraska because we're going to preview the Huskers coming up here in just a second and talking about North Carolina. If Oklahoma wins, a way they might be able – the way I don't like the matchup, the way they might be able to kind of negate that is what they do on the base paths. North Carolina has a very good defense, but I think their catcher has struggled at times throwing out runners this year. So, getting on base, Randy, that's going to come at a premium. I don't care how they do it. Walk, get hit with the ball, whatever. And then, run your offense like we always talk about. If you want to do chaos as your mantra, steal bags, put the pressure on North Carolina. At that point, you'll have nothing to lose and one of the best pitchers in baseball on the mound backing you up.
No doubt. And like you say, we've been saying it all week and really all season. It's like it feels like when they've struggled this year, it's when they've got away from their mantra, and they haven't done that. Whereas I feel like kind of in the first two games in the SEC, you saw a little more of that.
Right.
And granted, they didn't get many hits early on against Vanderbilt. But, even when they did, I just felt like they played it conservative. And that was kind of the thing I looked at with that weekend, just play the way you do. 3 out of the last 5 games, they played their style. They've won those games. Or 3 out of the last 6, I guess. Sorry, 3 out of the last 6. And 3 games they've lost, they were very conservative on the base paths. They weren't risking things, So I think that's something to look at. Real fast, Dave. Who is this that tweeted out? College Baseball Nation. They always do a great job putting stuff together. To your point about, ranking as far as pitching staffs and how good North Carolina is, we'll just do this. I'm not going to use the national ranks because to me, that doesn't matter. That's got every team in the country in the ranks that didn't make the tournament, right?
Right.
So you look at this, and North Carolina ERA-wise, 7th in the country, Oklahoma, and this is for starters, 7th in the country, OU 37. WHIP, Oklahoma is 26, North Carolina is 3rd. Based on ball percentage, 4th for North Carolina, 40th for Oklahoma. K's, North Carolina only strikes out 27% of the guys, Oklahoma 12%, But the bullpen is where it evens out, and that's where I think Oklahoma has a chance. Now, ERA bullpen, they're number 1 in the nation. Oklahoma is 11th. In the WHIP, Oklahoma is 13. They are 9th. In walks, they are 32. Oklahoma is 7th. And in Ks, they are 16th. Oklahoma is 28th. So, if it comes to a battle of the bullpens, Oklahoma's got a much better shot. And I think that's kind of one of the things you can look at and go, hey, just get your 5 good innings out of your starter and hand it to the bullpen. And we can talk about a guy in a little while. Dylan Tate just gives you another guy. If he can go out there and perform, to get you a Jamie Hitt, to Dylan Tate, to Jaden Bowden, to Dylan Crooks. You got 4 guys. You get 5 out of your starter, you can piece together that last 4.
Yeah, and that almost mitigates the risk factor of going with Malachi against the Huskers when you look at what they have available to bring in just in case they see the first few innings, hey, he doesn't have it, this isn't working. You got a guy with Jamie Hitt. I think he's got 5 years experience playing college baseball. He's been lights out as a reliever this year. Yeah. You can go to him immediately and stabilize things. So, they know what they're doing. There's a reason they decided to go with Malachi Witherspoon and not their ace, because they have that bullpen you're talking about, Randy. But that's what it's going to come down to, pitching and defense, as Ed just said. Pitching always wins. That's a fact. He also said he would blacklist me if OU won. Obviously not, since you're here, but I did enjoy the OU victory. But Randy, that's going to be a fascinating regional to watch, man. In Nebraska, I'm telling you, we're going to get their beat guy on here in a second. They're not a gimme team. They are a very chippy, lively ball club.
I watched them pretty much most of every one of their games in the Big Ten tournament. They've got an edge. Will Bolt's a guy that played at Nebraska. He's their head coach. 2 years in a row, they've been a bubble team on the outside looking in like they were this year. And they get to tournament time and they go win. And it's not like in the Big Ten tournament, especially this year, that they had a bunch of gimmies they had to go beat. I mean, right. They beat Oregon in that tournament to win it all, So, yeah, they've got the capabilities. They played some good non-conference opponents where they got some good wins in the non-con, So it's kind of one of those things. Oklahoma cannot go in there and take them for granted. I will say, if Oklahoma goes in ready to play, which I expect they would, why wouldn't you be if you're going to the NCAA regionals? Oklahoma's going to win this game. I have zero problems in saying that. But if they go in at any point half-ass this game early on and they're not focused, Nebraska will bite them. And it's that simple.
Well, I mean, when I look at it, everything to me starts and stops with Oklahoma's defense. Like, 100%. We can talk about hitting. We can talk about 1 through 9. We can talk about pitching. I know there have been games in the past. We say, yeah, Malachi Witherspoon, or fans come out and say Malachi Witherspoon struggled or Cade Crossland struggled. Yet, if you watch the game or you go back to a certain inning, there's always one big error to point to that let the floodgates open. Now, maybe to people's point, guys like Malachi can do a better job of getting over the hurdle once something bad happens and not letting that snowball. But defensively and pitching, if they can play elite at both spots, they can scratch enough runs across to be a pesky team out there. And I'll tell you what, North Carolina does not want to see Oklahoma beat Nebraska with Malachi Witherspoon. They do not want any part of Kyson Witherspoon the next day. I'll tell you that.
100%, unless, by the way, they do it without Kyson, which still they would have to face Kyson, is if all of a sudden Malachi only goes 3 innings and OU burns up that bullpen.
Right.
Just to get, that would, that puts it in a different light. But, Dave, I mean, that's kind of the risk you're playing with in all these tournament games with the pitching staffs, with this scenario. And you talk about Oklahoma's defense, they turned 5 double plays in the SEC tournament. You talk about the mental edge of the pitchers. I really thought Cade Crossland, who's had some of the same problems Malachi has when something's gone wrong behind him, just kind of craters and falls in on himself. I thought after the Braden Horton drop, they ended up scoring 3 runs that inning, but it wasn't on Cade. He did a really good job. One of the hits that they got for one of the RBIs, it was a low and away slider that the guy just reached out and got, and it poked it in the right hole. So that's not one where you could say mentally Cade gave in. So that was, I thought, a good sign. It's crazy to say a game where you lose 6-1 is a good sign, but also they played Vanderbilt better than anyone else that Vanderbilt faced other than Ole Miss.
Yeah, that's right. Vandy, that's a funny team. We'll touch on them as we wrap up the show later, but it's humorous to me that people with Tim Corbin and Vandy really didn't talk about them, didn't pay them much mind, and all of a sudden, here they are, the number 1 overall seed in the country. Waiting to get our Nebraska guy on, working through some technical issues. But, and there was also a Kyle Branch error at second base in the game that you're talking about with Cade Crossland that led to another run. And, look, that's 2 pitches he made to get out of the inning on top of a Dawson Willis error at third on a high throw that kind of kick-started all the runs, happening. Those are 3 pitches he made that should be outs and usually are. So, I mean, you can point to a pitching staff just ERA only and say they're struggling or a game only, but there's always so much more to that. And defense this year for Oklahoma, not good. It needs to be in this regional.
Well, and that goes back to the pitching staff because defense not only fine, even if they go down as unearned runs or anything like that, and so it doesn't hurt your ERA. Think about it this way. All of a sudden in that inning we're talking about where a couple of those innings where those errors happened, Cade Crossland, who was pitching really well, he can maybe only go 6 innings at that point, 5 innings at that point, because he's throwing an extra 20, 30 pitches in those innings combined that gets his pitch count up. That's the other thing that it's easy just to look at the bare basics of a baseball game. without diving into the numbers and realize, hey, dude, if they make those plays behind them, it's not only keeping runs off the board, it's letting your starter go 7 innings now.
Right.
And
That's
it makes
exactly
your
right.
bullpen that much stronger in the next 2 or 3 games. And that's why more in the tournament, it's more important, in my opinion, than it has ever been, outside of the tournament.
Yeah, and that's where if you're an Oklahoma fan heading into this thing, it's a tough draw, Randy. It just is. Chapel Hill, North Carolina's damn good, top to bottom. We keep talking about defense. They can play it, and they, of course, can also pitch. I kind of put their staff up there with LSU, like, with Anderson that came into Norman, then Ianson back to back. And they really, shut things down and swept Oklahoma. North Carolina is better than that, so that they're damn capable to do it. But it's just going to come down to how Oklahoma executes in spots. For whatever reason, earlier this year against really good teams like Oregon State, when they needed that hit, late in the game, when there's 2 outs and you got to get something going, they got it. As soon as conference play hit, it seemed like that just became tougher and tougher. I know these arms are really good, but guys outside of Jackson Willits, Easton Carmichael, Jason Walk, they've got to step up and have better series.
No doubt. And I will say this. I thought that, again, a little bit of positive with the SEC tournament. You mentioned Jackson Willits. He made all-tournament team. He had been struggling for the last month, and so that was kind of a positive sign. And you look at some of the other guys. Now, it's kind of weird. Kyle Branch kind of went the other way. Didn't have a good, weekend at the plate. But Jason Walk was pretty decent through 2 of the 3 games. Even Desan Harris at the plate did a lot of the good things in those first 2 games. And I'll be honest, I know you have frustrations with Desan. I'm to the point. I think Desan should be your everyday. I don't care if you put him in left or right and move, gamble to the other spot. I don't care where they play. I think that should be your everyday outfit at this point in time, just due to the defensive issues we talked about. And I know he had that weird drop, but in the grand scheme of things,
that was a tough play.
He's a better outfielder, especially with the way Sam Christensen's been playing over the last 3 weeks.
Yeah, Evan Bland with the Omaha World is not seeing anything. So, Randy, what we're going to do, I'm going to call him, put him on speakerphone, and we're going to do an interview by phone.
This should be interesting. All right, let's do it. Yeah,
so calling.
While you're doing that, I'll just kind of keep talking what I was talking about. The outfield is an issue of Oklahoma, but I think you got to put your best guys out there and let them go.
Evan, Dave, and Randy with 107.7. We've got you live on our show. Evan Bland with the Omaha World, correct?
World Herald, yep.
World Herald. Okay, you do cover Nebraska baseball, Nebraska football. Of course, got a big one coming up Friday out in Chapel Hill, Oklahoma. Makes a decision that they're going to save their starter and push their 3rd guy against the Huskers. What's kind of been the reaction since that's been found out Oklahoma's going with their number 3?
Well, I think there's been some surprise on the Nebraska side. I don't know about the coaches and players specifically, but the fan base, certainly that's gotten their attention. I mean, they knew in the last couple of days they've done their research on Kyson Witherspoon and what he's all about and his draft stock. And so you get to this point in the tournament now, and it's generally teams are going to throw their best guys, even if you're a national seed facing a regional 4. And so I think it got some people's attention that Oklahoma's going the other way. And I know Kyson said, I guess in his interviews out there, that he's looking forward to facing North Carolina potentially. So it's it's an interesting situation. I think they were excited for the opportunity anyway. I'm sure they still are. And I think it just ratchets up the intensity of this game because it really sets Oklahoma up well if they were to win it. And if Nebraska does it, then maybe it's because the door was cracked open just a little bit for them. So I think it does add a little bit of intrigue to this opener that was already pretty interesting.
Hey, Evan, now when you look at Nebraska and what they've done really the last couple of years in the tournament of the Big Ten to make the regional, going and winning it, what has made Will Bolt such a good coach really when it comes to postseason? He gave them fits last year in regionals and, again, back-to-back tournament champions. What does Will Bolt do so well as a coach that gets this team ready?
Well, I mean, he was an infielder for Nebraska in the early 2000s. He was a part of some of their best baseball programs that they've ever had, and learned under Dave Van Horn. He was the coach at Nebraska when Will Bolt was there, so got a really good start. Learned under Rob Childress, who's now Nebraska's pitching coach, when Rob was at Texas A&M for a long time. So he came up in a pretty good coaching tree. I think offensively, one of the things about Nebraska that's a little bit different is they tend to embrace sort of, I guess you would call it small ball a little bit more than a lot of schools will. They like to hit and run. They're going to work counts. They're going to lay down bunts in kind of surprise situations. And so kind of the foundation of the program tends to be built around pitching and defense. And then they add speed for what they want to do offensively. And I think sometimes that can affect opposing pitchers that are so used to facing power lineups throughout the course of a season, lineups that are sort of Major League Baseball style, 3 true outcomes with strikeouts and home runs and power. And I think Nebraska, when it goes a little bit of a different way and it does put pressure on a defense through some of the things I mentioned, that can throw pitchers off their game a little bit. And we'll see if that translates this weekend. Of course, you got to get on base to wreak havoc on the base paths. But I think that's kind of what I would watch for. Is it's just a little bit of a different style than what maybe some of these power pitchers are used to.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. Oklahoma does a lot of the same thing. Chaos. They like to get on base and wreak some havoc, but you've got to get on base for that to happen. But I knew nothing about Nebraska coming into this year as far as expectations go. I know that this is the second year in a row they've won the Big Ten tournament. Talk to me about, what were the expectations for Nebraska baseball in 2025?
It was kind of a full circle season. They went into February as a preseason top 25 team. They were picked within the league by coaches to finish second behind Oregon, and it didn't play out that way in the regular season. They were at one point 2-7 in the league. They were in danger of missing the Big Ten tournament. They had injuries. They had a pretty tough schedule, both in terms of caliber of opponent and logistically. They spent 11 days at one point on the West Coast for a trip. And so all that kind of added up. They lost their preseason ace, Mason McConaughey, and they really just kind of fell off the radar nationally. And then they got back one of their better sort of swingmen starter relievers in Tucker Timmerman about in mid-April. And I think they just kind of embraced what they were. They tried for a while offensively to be more of a traditional power style lineup. Kind of went back to their small ball roots, figured out which arms they could trust, and suddenly you look up and they've won just about every weekend for the last month and a half. And guys have found their roles, and they win the Big Ten tournament. And so they're kind of back where they started. People anticipated that this roster with an older lineup and with some depth of pitching would be in a regional and have a chance to make some noise. As it ended up turning out, that's what happened. It's just the path to get there was a lot different than what was expected.
Evan, we've talked a lot about Oklahoma, who they're starting, starting Malachi and not Kyson. Kind of for the Oklahoma fans out there, give us a little scouting report on what the Oklahoma hitters are going to see on Friday.
Well, Nebraska's starting Jackson Brockett. He's a senior left-hander who has had some ups and downs. He had a great story a year ago. He was on the verge of really being removed from the team just because he hadn't performed all that well. And he goes out on a midweek and throws a no-hitter against Kansas State. It was the program's first no-hitter since the 50s. And follow that up shortly thereafter with a career start in the Big Ten Tournament Championship game that year. That really kind of solidified his spot back on the team. And then this year, he was kind of the Sunday guy going into the season and really has been quietly maybe Nebraska's most consistent arm for the last month and a half or so. He's got a sub-2 ERA in his last 6 starts. It has a pretty versatile offering, fastball, changeup, breaking stuff. Tends to have pretty good command, has regional starting experience from a year ago. So kind of an embodiment really of what Nebraska is all about. An older team, a team with a little bit of experience, one that when they're on their game, They can hang with anybody. I mean, they beat Vanderbilt this year. They took a series from Oregon State. They just last weekend beat Oregon and UCLA, which are national seeds in the Big Ten tournament. And so Brockett was a big part of that. He was the one who started against Oregon, and just a guy who's going to provide some length and I think maybe composure in one of these high-pressure situations like Friday afternoon.
Well, all right. We're coming up to it. I mean, the game itself is Friday. The starters are announced. Give me your pick. That's the last one I got.
Oh man, I think it's going to be a great game. I just spent a week covering Nebraska in Omaha at the site of the College World Series. They looked like they were, really on a run. If they can take that momentum, put it in a carry-on a flight to Chapel Hill, I like their chances. But you certainly can't discount what Oklahoma's doing. I think Oklahoma is the first team Nebraska's played in a while that does mirror its style of play quite a bit. I think the teams are pretty similar in that regard. So I guess I'll have to go with the homer pick and say Nebraska, but I absolutely am expecting a good game and wouldn't be shocked at all to see Oklahoma come out on top either.
All right, Evan. Well, hey, man, we can't thank you enough. Sorry about the technical glitch. We'll see if we can get that ironed out and maybe meet up after this thing is done.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks for having me, guys.
All right. Appreciate it.
Hey, Dave, you said one thing I don't like, lefty, which I knew that coming in. And that's, again, why I go back to, look, it's already been determined. Malachi is a starter. But listen to the numbers. Listen to how Brockett is pitched down the stretch. That's somebody, and granted, I know people go there playing Big Ten opponents. I don't care. He did that to Oregon on the weekend as well. It's a scary proposition with what Oklahoma's going in with, and I'm not taking anything away from Malachi. Just, it's scary for Oklahoma.
Yeah, look, the splits against the lefties for this Oklahoma lineup, they suck. They're horrible. That's not good news, and Brockett's really good. So, yeah, that doesn't bode well. But the one area I kind of look at, I like with this, Malachi Witherspoon, everybody forgets, was the sought-after recruit coming out of Florida. It wasn't Kyson. Malachi was the big prize. Now, they got to Norman. Obviously, Kyson accepted things faster, kind of caught on to big-time college baseball and became the star he is. My point is that is still there with Malachi. He's the third starter. He can reach 100-plus miles an hour. If he can dig down and put together one of those starts that we saw towards the end of the season, I don't care who's throwing for Nebraska. I think Oklahoma, top to bottom, is a better team than the Cornhuskers. I know they beat Oregon. I know they beat UCLA. That's not Ole Miss. That's not LSU. That's not an SEC schedule. So I don't know how much stock I put into that. All I know is Oklahoma does not hit left-handers well. So Malachi needs to bring his A game Friday.
Yeah, and it's one Oklahoma hitters just can't psych themselves out. They know the numbers. They know they've struggled. And it's one of those you can't psych yourself out in this game as a hitter. And I think that's what they've done lately against lefties because they had a little more success early on in the year, and they've hit this funk against them. Part of that's SEC pitching, and I'm really interested to see how the SEC does in regional play because they beat up on each other so much.
Right.
Do we see some of these teams like an Oklahoma? Heck, let's even throw out, the Kentuckys, those type of teams have a better run in regional play now because, it's one of those, they're playing different teams. That's what's going to be interesting to see.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you went there. Thank you, Georgia Dog. Supercuts did not do a great job on my hair. You know what? Because I cut it. I get the trimmer out. Bam. I go with a 1 on the side, I think a 5 on top, and I call it good. Typically, I'll stop and be like, I'll come back and finish it next week. I don't care because I'll wear a hat all the time anyway. But, Ed, appreciate that. But I did want to bounce around to the other SEC regionals. One caught my eye, man, and that's Dallas Baptist down in Baton Rouge with LSU. LSU cannot blink with BBU. That is a stout 1 through 9. The Dallas Bombers. I cannot wait to watch that one.
I think it'll be fun. I don't expect much of a challenge. I mean, based on when I watched Dallas Baptist in their conference tournament this weekend, they look like a good team, but not a great team. And with the frontline pitching that LSU has, I think that's the difference right there. I mean, you're not wrong. If they blink, or if the pitchers don't have it, game on. Let's see what happens. But if they're frontline starters, because here's the thing, LSU, I guarantee they're going the number 3 or 4 guy in game 1. So DBU in a winners bracket game, they're getting Cade Anderson. Everson, like in a winners bracket game, if Cade Anderson wins, that's who they're going to see in the elimination game the next day on Sunday. That's what makes it so hard. And that's, I guess, why I'd go back with all these games. Game 1 is so important in a 14 double elimination tournament. You got to win game 1, or it's almost impossible to come back.
No, game 1 is everything in these. Every OU fan watching is like, not a good team. They run-rolled Oklahoma 11-0.
No, they're good.
On a Wednesday night, not on a weekend series, when you're facing the other team's best, that is what they'll have at LSU. DBU in the postseason, though, there's just something about them that they're just tricky. Ask Oklahoma State. That's another one I want to talk about. Oklahoma State's regional. I think OSU is at a point they can make some noise and come out of this thing. They're starting to play good baseball. They've been dormant all season, putting it together late. They got a coach, on the way out, retirement they're wanting to play well for. Keep an eye on the Cowboys.
Well, I told somebody today at the office who's an OSU season ticket holder, I was like, you guys got a shot. I'm not taking anything. Georgia's a great team. But I think if you haven't paid attention to Oklahoma State over the last month, a lot of the pitching problems they've had in the starting rotation, they've solved a lot of them. They have the Big 12 Pitcher of the Year, according to some, not the one, that ended up winning the award. But, you look at that, they've been really developing guys, and their offense to that Georgia ballpark, the right field is the short porch, right?
Yeah.
Give me Nolan Schubert and Bergerman as 2 guys that can take advantage of that and, potentially score with Georgia. Now, with all that being said, the way OSU's played this year, they may go out and lose game 1 and never face Georgia. But I'm just saying that if I were the Bulldogs of Georgia, I would not feel really comfortable with Oklahoma State in that regional. I've watched them a lot, and that team, once they got to consistently play, that's what a lot of people forget too. Early on in the conference season, weather took out one series. Then like the next weekend or 2 weekends later, the wildfires that happened in Stillwater took out another series, all but one game. So it's kind of like they didn't get that consistency vibe going. And once they hit that spot where the consistency level started, this team started putting some things together. They're not great, but they're very, very dangerous.
Yeah, scary team. I have to bet that was Mark Henderson at the office. Love talking love talking OSU baseball with Mark. But that's a team if I'm Georgia. Sorry, Ed. I don't want to see walk in for all the reasons you just said. And number 2, Oklahoma State ain't going to be intimidated of anybody in college baseball. I hate to admit it, but they're up there with some of the best names that we've ever talked
100%.
about in the sport. So yeah, they're going to swagger right in like they belong and think they're going to win, and that's one to watch. But
and I'll say this about them. I've been one very critical of Josh. I honestly don't think he's done that great job as a head coach as a whole. But one time you want to win games is in the postseason. They tend to do better when they play in these regionals outside of O'Brate. Back to that chip on the shoulder, it's almost like they lose that chip when they play at home as a 1 seed. I don't know if he can't convince his players or whatever, but when they go on the road, he has that ability to put that chip on the shoulder, like convince every player in there, no one thinks we're good enough to be here. No one thinks we're good enough to win. And next thing you know, you got a team that's playing with like hitting a hornet's nest, and that team is coming after you. And so he's really good in the postseason. So it's going to be a fun regional in Georgia, I think.
Yeah, if I was a Georgia fan and I saw that draw Monday, I'd have said, oh, shit. But, yeah, that's going to be fun to watch. Randy, we've diced up the regionals all over the place. I did want to talk real quick before we wrap up the show. College football, we're under the, I think, 94-day mark before kickoff in Norman. I know the coaches got together down in Destin, Florida, where I've got some of these guys I do a college football show with. Some of them live in Destin, so they've been close by. And John Mateer getting a lot of pub. Randy, I saw some moronic head coach in the SEC came out anonymously and questioned if, the talent Mateer had out there in a glorified Mountain West can translate. If you're a good football player, you play football good. The guy is a good quarterback. There's a reason he was that coveted in the portal. I think Oklahoma with John Mateer, Ben Arbuckle, you look at Bill Bedenbaugh's track record and the talent they should have, at least on paper, up there this year. It's going to be hard to be worse on the O-line, but all of a sudden with weapons, guys like, Taylor Tatum, Xavier Robinson, Jaden Ott, I'm starting to become a believer that this team is going to be better than that 6.5 win total. In fact, I'm thinking 8-9 wins is actually plausible.
Yeah, I mean, I'm shocked the win total wasn't 7.5 because
Agreed.
I think that 7 to 8 win mark is the sweet spot. I think they can get to 9, but I just think for Vegas, I mean, to me, it's a layup. 6.5. I'm not saying mortgage your house on it, but you should feel pretty good about going laying the money there because I'm with you. And I get what that coach is saying, and I'm not making John Mateer out to be a world beater because my thing is he is going to be playing a lot better talent. But just that talent, even if it steps back 30% from the way he played at Washington State, makes this offense at Oklahoma from what it was last year 80% better than last year's offense.
Yeah, and
So
I mean,
I think that's what gets lost.
yeah, that too. He's going to be playing against better comp, but you know what? He's going to have better talent around him with the skill guys that we're talking about. Jaden Gibson, if he comes back at wide receiver healthy, Giovanni Gibson that broke his leg, I was really starting to get sold on before that happened. I think he's 6'4", 225. The guy can do a standing backflip, and then Satania, the Arkansas transfer at wide receiver, to go with guys like Deion Burks. Tight end, still the one spot and the one coach on staff. I can't make heads or tails of, but the defense we both think, everybody thinks, is going to be pretty freaking nasty. That front seven across, David Stone coming back, I think was big. He only had 7 tackles a year ago, but that's such an athletic body up front, which you have to have in the SEC. Just another guy on that rotation to take up space and allow those edge rushers like R. Mason Thomas to get after it. He's kind of being slept on, in my opinion. The linebackers, Kip Lewis is a star. He's coming in this year. Playmaker on that defense. Kobe McKenzie, kind of your boy the last 2 years, has a chance to really shine. So, Randy, I see a good football team in Norman, a damn good football team. I didn't see that one coming.
No doubt. And I think your point on David Stone, let's say he doesn't pan out to be the number one defensive lineman, like that good. Like he was ranked the number one defensive lineman in his class. To your point, he's athletic, he's big, he's a utility piece because in the SEC, and I know all the listeners out there that are watching this and everything know it that followed SEC football, you need depth. They don't all have to be superstars,
Right.
but you need pieces. And so David Stone was big to get him to come back after he got in the portal because whatever David Stone was or is going to be better than what at that juncture in time they could have got to come back in out of the portal to replace him. And I think that's the key with that replacement.
Yeah,
get back.
Yeah, I agree with that. And two, David Stone being kind of a homegrown guy, an OU guy, I think the fan base, you really felt like that was a pierce through the heart. You got a bunch of good news in the offseason, just on the heels of getting Jaden Ott. You're feeling good. And out of the blue, I know we all got texts and tweets that night that Stone had entered. I thought that was big just from a program perspective of keeping momentum positive heading into the season. But you're right. He's a guy out there to go with guys like Grayson Halton, who I think is being massively slept on as well as an interior pass rusher for Oklahoma. So they got talent, they have depth, they have skill guys, and they got a quarterback. That's a lot of the pieces they did not have last year, and a coach on offense to coach them. I love Brent, after they went after Jim Knowles and didn't work out. I love Brent stepping up and saying, you know what, I'll do it because I'm pretty damn good. And he has been. I mean, the guy's been one of the best DCs in college football. So you got to coach over the offense. You got to coach over the defense. You got guys to play. I like it. Give me 9 wins.
Hey, I'm right there with you. And I'll say this. I'm one that I wish they would have got Jim Knowles. I think he could have been very interesting for this program. But in some ways, in a do-or-die year where, for the coaching staff, it might be better that it is Brent. No one's going to add any wrinkles. Like if Jim Knowles comes in, he may have ran this style of defense, but he'd have still put his own twist on it. And if you're Brent Venables, why wouldn't you want to run it knowing I got to win this year or I'm out of work,
Right.
So it's like, I think in some ways it might be better that ends up being Brent as the defensive coordinator. Now we'll see if it pays off. That's kind of where we're at right now.
Yeah, I mean, there were things to point to, really. I mean, the last 3 years with Brent being a head coach, he'll have to improve on for these things to happen. But hats off to the Oklahoma administration. They're giving the guy every single chance to succeed, taking away pretty much everything besides just being a defensive coach. They got guys at every spot to do their job. Now it's just up to Brent to do it. He's got the pieces, and we'll wait and see. Randy, we got
Real fast.
Yeah.
Real fast. Did you hear Sark's comment today
I did not.
about basically saying the reporter that said $40 million for his roster basically was false. Without saying false, he said false. And the reports are coming out that SEC rosters are between 25 and 30 million. I think that makes sense. I don't know where On3 got that report. I do think it's false. I thought 40 million was pushing it. Not that Texas doesn't have money, but I'm like, let's be real. A lot of the guys, if you'd have told me last year's roster in Austin was 40 million,
that's more
I
plausible.
might have bought it with some of those names that were coming back. This year, I'm kind of like, there's some really good names coming back, but it's not like last year's roster.
No, I saw what you're talking. I think it was Kurt Bowles that reported that.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I saw his tweet, and I was like, and I reached out to some Texas people that I know, and they unequivocally said, no, that's completely false. So 25 to 30 for a good SEC roster still seems asininely high to me, but that's the world we're in. Yeah, I did want to touch on something with the revenue sharing stuff. I'm sure you saw that Oklahoma was forced to make some cutbacks. I think they're doing that to kind of get out ahead. I don't think they'll be the only program to end up doing that.
I think there's programs around the country because, okay, I'm not making light of it. None of those, unfortunately, some people lost their jobs, but none of them were the names that everyone hears about, when they're let go on a daily, here and there
Right.
anyway, right?
Right.
There's probably other programs around the country already doing the same thing because it's not that a program doesn't have the budget. One thing Oklahoma is very proud about as an athletic department, and there's several around the country that do this, but they are a very proud program about making a profit as an athletic program and taking zero state dollars. They do this all through private funds. So I'm sure, to your point, this was getting out ahead going, hey, you know what? We still want to be that program that makes money, that still doesn't even look for any type of help from anywhere other than donors. And I'm sure these cuts are going, we don't need this spot anymore.
Right.
We can do this, or this person can do this job. It's part of being big business. It happens, man.
Yeah, it does, and it sucks for the people that lost their job, no doubt about it. But that's the climate we're in. I mean, things like this, decisions like that have to be made, and there are going to be sacrifices to it. That's the way it goes. But Randy, been a great show. I know something is happening right now you don't care about, but I do. Thunder basketball. Chance to clinch in OKC and move on to the NBA Finals. Anything you want to?
Daniel Bell has to drive back to Minneapolis.
Huh?
If they lose, Daniel's got to drive back to Minneapolis.
Drive?
Our coworker Daniel Bell, who is on the show daily, he covers the Thunder. Him and some other beat writers drove to Minnesota and back for the 2 games.
Oh,
and I guess last minute airlines, which I get, it's way too expensive. They're turning around and driving back tomorrow.
Hopefully they got 3 or 4 guys in there to share that drive, man. I would not want to be a part of that.
10.5-hour drive. And I'll tell you this, folks, if you don't know Daniel, he's very unbiased, but I think he's turned into the biggest Thunder homer tonight in the world. Just going, oh God, please let him
now, win. Well, I hate to say it, I kind of want to see Minnesota.
Exactly, just for fun. Hey, Daniel, have fun.
All right, Randy. Well, hey, man, it's going to be a great weekend. One of the best weekends of the year coming up in regional play.
Christmas morning's less than about 40 hours away now.
And I'll be on the air with you Friday morning as we kick it off.
11 to 3, right? No,
yep.
11 to 3. Yeah, 11 to 3.
All right, Mr. Heights. Well, anything else you want to close up with?
No, that's it, man. Can't wait. Get ready to watch regionals for about 3 straight days now. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Let's go. Mike Rooney, get the vocal cords warmed up. I'm going to go watch the Thunder, and hopefully Minnesota wins and D-Bell has to drive. All right, everybody, have a good night. This has been Red River North. We will